It takes roughly 30 seconds to one-hit KO a level 99 Blissey in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. This isn't just due to the fact that health bars go down really slowly in this game, but because Blissey has the single highest HP stat in all of Pokemon, despite the fact that 27 years had passed since it was introduced to the franchise. Stats are just one of many things that give a Pokemon its identity, beyond its design, typing, moveset, abilities. The stats are arguably what tell you the most about a Pokemon's purpose. The lowest HP in Pokemon belongs to Shedinja. At exactly 1 HP, Shedinja is incapable of increasing it no matter how hard you try. A level 1 Shedinja has the exact same HP as a level 100 Shedinja. A single attack is all it takes to knock it out. However, Shedinja does have a ridiculous ability in Wonder Guard, meaning only super effective attacks can directly deal damage to it. A high-risk Pokemon that, when played intelligently, can function as a win condition against gym leaders, the final boss of the game, or even in a competitive Pokemon tournament. Blissey is the exact opposite. It's a low-risk Pokemon that can sit in on many attacks due to its incredible HP stat, and can be played in such a way that the user can blunder turn after turn and still come out on top. Though Blissey can't exactly deal any notable damage to most Pokemon, and is more of a slow burn kind of playstyle. In short, Blissey is the HP stat. Blissey is sort of an avatar for the concept of HP in Pokemon. Effectively, every Pokemon that has the highest stat on record for a particular stat serves this role. So if Blissey is the HP stat, what exactly does that mean? Well, let's take a look at Blissey's role in a playthrough of Pokemon. Blissey is actually one of the rarest Pokemon ever. Unlike other non-legendary Pokemon, Blissey's rarity hasn't really decreased with time, with Blissey not even able to be encountered in most Pokemon games. For the most part, the only way to encounter Blissey is to find, catch, and evolve a Chansey, yet another exceedingly rare Pokemon. In Japanese, Chansey's name is Raki. It, much like Blissey, has an exceedingly high HP stat, the highest in the game prior to Blissey's introduction in Generation 2. In Pokemon Red and Blue, the first games in the franchise, the only way to encounter a Chansey before the post-game is in the Safari Zone, a sort of mini-game within the game where you have a limited number of steps to try and catch as many rare Pokemon as possible, with the rarest of them being Chansey. With it having just a 1% encounter rate in the center area and a slightly better 4% encounter rate in Area 4 North, catching it is an even more difficult ordeal, with it having a base catch rate of 4.9% and a base flee rate of 45%. The odds are completely stacked against the player, with the player having to win 2 lotteries in a row to ever catch a Chansey. The other time in the game where you can encounter a Chansey is in Cerulean Cave, an area locked off to the player until after they become the champion of the Kanto region. It's in this point of the game that most players will be able to finally catch their Chansey, but if they already have one from the Safari Zone and don't want another, Chansey now fills a completely different purpose in this game. Every Pokemon has a certain amount of experience that they will grant once they've been defeated, and Chansey happens to be the one with the highest EXP payout at 255, meaning that players who manage to encounter and defeat a Chansey will be able to quickly level up their Pokemon. So no matter if a player is encountering a Chansey in the Safari Zone to catch it, or encountering it in Cerulean Cave when grinding levels, every encounter with Chansey is considered to be very lucky. So what is Chansey's purpose? Well, it's a lucky balloon of HP that pops and is filled with goodies for the player. In Pokemon's case, it's filled with experience. You might have heard that its base XP yield was 255 and thought that that was a really strangely specific number to be the highest in the game. And you'd be right, it's a very specific number. Generation 1 and 2 of Pokemon were both 8-bit games, meaning that the highest possible number to be represented in 8 bits is 255. 255 is the absolute highest XP yield that Game Freak could have given Chansey, further solidifying its purpose in the game. 255 also happens to be Blissey's HP stat, where Chansey's HP stat was just a bit lower at 250. Blissey was given not only the absolute highest HP in Pokemon up to that point in time, but it was given the absolute highest possible HP stat that could be given to it given the hardware limitations at the time. As a matter of fact, after all these years, Chansey's HP stat has yet to be surpassed, with the closest Pokemon to do it being Eternatus Eternamax form, who also has 255 HP. Now, Eternatus Eternamax form isn't even an obtainable Pokemon. It's locked to a single boss encounter at the climax of Pokemon Sword and Shield and will likely never be seen again. Its massive HP combined with its other high stats made it the single bulkiest Pokemon in history. Again, as a Pokemon who's locked to a single boss encounter in Pokemon Sword and Shield, Eternatus Eternamax form is effectively disqualified for this discussion, as it would be the highest stat in multiple categories. But it's worth bringing this up just to explain to what degree Blissey's place as the highest HP stat in Pokemon is protected by the game designers. Eternamax Eternatus wasn't even limited to 255 HP because of the hardware it's on. It came out on the Nintendo Switch, and say what you want about the Nintendo Switch's power, but it can count to at least 256, maybe even higher. Blissey's status as the highest HP stat in the game is highly protected by Game Freak. Beyond its role in a playthrough though, Blissey's HP stat does allow for it to be a solid wall in online competitive matches. It was designed to have one of the lowest physical defense stats in the game, because if it had a usable defense stat, it would be one of the most frustrating walls in the game bar none. You only need to look at Eviolite Chansey to see this in action. But Blissey, while not a common sight in competitive play, is considered to be a difficult Pokemon to remove, with it being able to utilize its ability Serene Grace to have an increased 20% chance to freeze, paralyze, or burn opponents with Ice Beam, Thunderbolt, or Flamethrower, and being able to spam Minimize to dodge most attacks in the game and use its high HP to have a very large margin of error and recover all of that health back with Soft Boiled. Blissey is a frustrating Pokemon to battle, and it's a Pokemon that to a certain extent requires the player to be lucky to beat it. Or you can just click close combat and wait 1.5 minutes. So if Blissey effectively is the HP stat, what about the other stats? Well, there's 5 more to cover in attack, defense, special attack, special defense, and speed. But before we do, I want to remind you all to leave a like in the video and subscribe if you haven't already. If you want to support my channel even further and get access to exclusive videos and my members only Discord server, you can click either the join button below or join my Patreon for as low as $1 a month. This lets me pay for editing and keep the channel afloat. So if you enjoy, please consider doing this. Now back to the video. Very few stats in Pokemon have as much aura surrounding them as the attack stat. It's the single most aggressive stat in the game, with it basically determining if a Pokemon's going to be a threat or not. While this also applies to the special attack stat, I've never seen anyone pop off over a really strong Flamethrower the way that people do over a Choice Banded Flare Blitz. It's just crisp. I don't know. The attack stat is typically associated with some of the most powerful Pokemon in the game, and despite it falling off in terms of overall power over the years, the Pokemon that the Pokemon Company most wants associated with power is without a doubt Mewtwo. Now, for a long time, Mewtwo didn't have the highest attack stat in the game. As a matter of fact, Mewtwo has never had the highest attack stat in Pokemon. However, it did have the highest special attack stat in Generation 1, or rather, the highest special stat. In Gen 2, it had the highest special attack stat at 154. This is before it was quickly power crept by Deoxys attack form in Generation 3, who had a ridiculous 180 attack and special attack stat. It would make sense that for the longest time, the avatar of offense would be a Pokemon who literally has attack in its name. Deoxys attack would remain the absolute highest attack and special attack stat holder for 3 generations. During those 3 generations, it remained not only one of the most powerful Pokemon in the game, but a terrifying presence in competitive matches, with it being unusable in official tournaments and even being banned to the Ubers tier in Smogon singles, an unofficial format but by far the most popular way to play competitive single battles. But Deoxys isn't necessarily one of Pokemon's most iconic designs. It might be a mythical Pokemon, but it wasn't an icon of the franchise, a mascot that people would immediately think of when the franchise had its name dropped. At least not in the same way that Mewtwo was. So why shouldn't Mewtwo be the most threatening Pokemon in the game? Well, as Generation 6 came around, the Pokemon Company found a way to rectify this. Mega Evolution. Mega Evolution would be a mechanic that allows for Pokemon to increase its stats and change its ability temporarily. This mechanic caused previously non-viable Pokemon to skyrocket to the top of the competitive scene, with Mega Kangaskhan, Mega Mawile, and even Mega Sableye being some of the more notable inclusions. But Mega Evolution wasn't limited to being a mechanic that would help out just the less viable Pokemon. Nope, Pokemon wanted to move some merch, and the best way to do this was to give Mega Evolutions to fan favorites, absolutely throwing game balance at the window sometimes. These included Mega Metagross, Mega Salamence, Mega Rayquaza, who could hold an item. I don't know why they did that. I'll buy the plush. I'll buy the plush, Game Freak. I'll buy the plush. And of course, Mega Mewtwo, who not only received a Mega Evolution, but 2 Mega Evolutions, which played entirely differently from each other. With Mega Mewtwo X being a bulky physical attacker who has the highest attack stat of all time at 190, and Mega Mewtwo Y, who was a fast and frail special attacker with the highest special attack stat of 194. Yes, with the introduction of Mega Evolutions, Pokemon was able to reinstate Mewtwo as the single most powerful Pokemon in the game, with both forms sitting at the top of their respective mountains, with it not even being able to be surpassed by, and I'm gonna pronounce these in every possible way so no one can say I'm wrong, Mega Rayquaza, or Rayquaza, Mega Arceus, or Arceus, Ultra Necrozma, or Necrozma, or even Gigantamax Eternamida, or even Sabado Gigantamax. Pokemon with attacking stats as high as the Mega Mewtwo's serve a very important purpose. In-game, they're more or less a reward for the player beating the game. If the player were granted access to these Pokemon too early, they just sweep through the game and not really take it all in the way that the game devs intended them to. Granted, this is Pokemon we're talking about, so you kind of just mash A anyways most of the time if you're a fan of the franchise. You can't play through Pokemon Sword and Shield and tell me that you didn't like Hop. You did not read. I know you didn't read the game. But when you're granted access to these kinds of Pokemon in the post-game, it functions similarly in a way to unlocking, like, flying. When you beat Pokopia, you unlock Magnemite, which makes traversal and building much easier and less of a headache because you already beat the game, there's no need for the tedium. When you beat Pokemon Legends Arceus, you unlock the Legend Plate, which causes Arceus to always deal super effective damage to the target with its move Judgment. A one-size-fits-all solution to every battle from now on. The Mega Mewtwo's are basically this for a casual playthrough of Pokemon X and Y, which is really cool because not only do the avatars of offense have to be broken for a casual playthrough, but they also need to be balanced for online play. Offensive Pokemon effectively set the pace of battle, with the most immediately threatening Pokemon being a proactive force in the battle, forcing everything else to have to play reactively to it. Take, for example, Mega Charizard Y, perhaps the single most proactive Pokemon in the current competitive scene. Its immediate potential for high damage output and easy KOs forces the game to warp around its presence. Pokemon will start running moves like Wide Guard to block heat waves, people will start to train their Pokemon more defensively to guarantee it lives a hit from it, and entire teams will start to change to have better matchups into Mega Charizard Y. I explain all this to say, dude, the Mega Mewtwo forms kinda suck in competitive, and that's hilarious because how is the easy mode button for Pokemon so bad in a competitive match? Well, basically it has to do with power creep. Yeah, if you drop Mega Mewtwo X or Y in Generation 5 and prior, they're going to be overpowered. But in a modern competitive environment, they're pretty underwhelming. Look, if you have access to a Mega Pokemon or a Mega Legendary Pokemon, that means that everyone else at that tournament does as well. And these guys are far from being the best choice of the bunch, with them being outclassed by even Base Mewtwo. Base Mewtwo has greater damage output than Mega Mewtwo Y, simply by giving it the Life Orb to boost its damage at the expense of some health, all without having to use your Mega slot on that Pokemon. And this is doubly hilarious when you realize that Base Mewtwo is also an outclassed Pokemon that doesn't even crack the top 10 best legendary Pokemon in competitive. Yes, that crown belongs to Calyrex Shadow Rider, a pun that I did not intend when I was writing this script. Calyrex Shadow Rider has a higher special attack stat than Base Mewtwo and can also hold a Life Orb while even being faster than Mega Mewtwo Y. I wouldn't say this is actually a bad thing unless you're a Mewtwo fan, because it allows for the Mega Mewtwo's to pull double duty. They can be a big broken stick that a casual player can mindlessly use to deal with all problems in a single player playthrough, but is also just bad enough online that it sort of teaches the player that high attacking stats aren't everything a Pokemon needs to succeed in a match. It might have been an accident, but if you ask me, Game Freak kind of nailed this. Now, in this section, I did lie a little bit, or rather, a lot, because as of October 2025, Mega Mewtwo Y is actually no longer the Pokemon with the highest special attack stat, as it's now been overtaken by Mega Zygarde. Mega Zygarde boasts the highest special attack stat in history at 216, a special attack stat so high that it doesn't need to invest in it at all to pick up easy one-hit KOs. This is all combined with its brand new signature move of Nihilite, a 200 base power Dragon-type attack, which completely ignores the Fairy-type immunity to Dragon-type attacks. I mention this all to say that Mega Zygarde functions as that giant stick that you unlock when you beat Pokemon Legends ZA, and I'm curious to see if Pokemon can stick the landing when it comes to making it balanced for online play in the same way that the Mewtwo's were once Zygarde does show up in Pokemon Champions. I'm kind of holding my breath on this. If attacking Pokemon set the pace of a battle, then the defensive Pokemon are kind of a speed limit. This concept isn't lost on competitive players, with stall matches having the potential to last literally hundreds of turns. This speed limit comparison especially rings true when you consider the face of competitive Pokemon, Incineroar. While Incineroar might not have even close to the highest defensive stats in the game, it has some of the best defensive tools and abilities to make it one of the best defensive support Pokemon in the franchise. As a matter of fact, as much as people dislike seeing Incineroar in basically every metagame and almost every match, it's kind of a necessary evil. As power creep continues in Pokemon and the average offensive stat goes up over time, even more powerful defensive tools have to be added to the game to stop offensive Pokemon from getting out of control. Imagine if Incineroar just didn't exist. Just how many teams would Mega Charizard Y run through? Just how broken would Zacian Crown be? And would Calyrex Shadow Rider just be unstoppable? Well, no. Something else would take Incineroar's place in the metagame, but it'd be far worse at that job, and offensive Pokemon would eventually rule the roost. I mean, this conscious decision to add even greater defensive tools as power increases over time has never been more clearly intentional than when Grimmsnarl was added to the game in Generation 8. This bulky dark type had access to priority dual screens, fake out, and tons of other annoying tools in the very same game where Dynamax was added. Dynamax being a mechanic which takes offensive Pokemon and cranks their value and power all the way up to 11. So with power creep necessitating even greater defensive tools, why is it we saw the greatest defense stat of all time all the way back in Generation 2 with Shuckle?
Yeah! Shuckle!
Shuckle is an odd Pokemon. It is not only the Pokemon with the highest defense stat in history, but it's also the Pokemon with the highest special defense stat, not counting Eternamax Eternatus, of course. And as a matter of fact, the only Pokemon who come remotely close to challenging Shuckle's defense stat record are Mega Pokemon like Mega Aggron and Mega Steelix, who both tie it at 230. This is a sign that Pokemon is invested in protecting Shuckle's status at the top of the pack of defensive Pokemon. Even Deoxys Defense Form, a Pokemon whose entire identity is its defensive prowess, doesn't come close to matching Shuckle's record. But the key detail with the Pokemon that ties Shuckle for its defense stat record is the fact that none of them can remotely come close to saying that they have a similar special defense stat to it. The point is, Shuckle is the only Pokemon who can do both. Shuckle is defense. Everything from its design to the way that you catch it in-game kind of drives this point home. Shuckle is caught in Cyanwood City in Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal. You can counter it by using Rock Smash on rocks near the beach in this city until you trigger the encounter and Shuckle finally shows up. Rock Smash is a low power fighting type move with a 50% chance to lower the target's defense stat by 1 stage each time it's used. It's not the strongest move of all time and will likely never be used outside of a playthrough, but if you use it over and over again, you'll eventually get greater returns and break through even the most defensive of Pokemon. It's telling that you need this move in order to encounter Shuckle in the first place. A Pokemon who may not be the most immediately threatening, but can wear down a team over time and be a frustrating opponent. A battle with Shuckle effectively serves as a tutorial on how to use it, as Shuckle in Generation 2 didn't learn very many moves, but it would always be encountered with the move Wrap. Wrap doesn't deal much initial damage at all, but if you have a Pokemon that is incapable of dealing much damage to Shuckle and it gets trapped in by Wrapped, not only will it not be able to switch out of battle, but it'll take damage over time at the end of each turn. In just a couple of turns, the player facing Shuckle will notice that their Pokemon has nearly fainted and the Shuckle doesn't look much worse for wear. Defensive Pokemon were a pretty new phenomena in Generation 2, as basically every Pokemon in Generation 1 was built offensively. They were meant to throw out high power moves. Yes, some Pokemon like Cloyster have incredible defenses and just passable offenses, but there really weren't any pure defensive Pokemon just yet, making this hidden tutorial of Shuckle kind of necessary back in 1999. Now, in a modern sense, Shuckle's playstyle hasn't really changed much. Yes, it learns more moves now, but most of the important inclusions were meant to buff the same playstyle that it had back in 1999. Infestation works identically to Wrap, but is a bug-type move which allows for Shuckle to deal damage over time to even Ghost-type Pokemon, which would have been immune to Wrap. Shuckle also got access to the move Guard Split, which allows for it to average its sky-high defenses with a partner Pokemon like Eviolite Chansey to make them even more frustrating to KO.
Mr. Boosted, this is the 5th video you had me edit where you mentioned minimize Chansey. Ah!
As a side note, if you use Shuckle and Chansey with Guard Split, I don't want you subscribed to my channel. Keep going, doors that way. Shuckle can even use Power Split to average its incredibly low offenses with an opponent to nerf their damage output. To drive the point home that Shuckle doesn't use its attacking stats at all even further, it got access to the move Power Trick. This move swaps Shuckle's attack and defense stats entirely, causing Shuckle from that point on to have some of the lowest defenses but become one of the most powerful Pokemon in the game, as its defense stats and attack stats have just switched. At this point, Shuckle has even higher attacking stats than the Mega Mewtwo's and Zygarde. Shuckle was granted a gimmick meant to drive attention to the fact that its attack stat is awful while its defense stats are incredible. Even in Generation 5, it was granted the ability Contrary. This ability causes all stat changes done to the user to be reversed, so if it was supposed to have its attack stat lowered, the user's attack stat will go up. If the user was supposed to have its speed lowered, it's gonna get faster. This ability was given consciously to Shuckle to allow it to benefit from yet another move added in Generation 5, Shell Smash. This move allowed the user to smash its shell, lowering their defense stats and sharply increasing its attacking stats and speed. But when Shuckle uses it with the ability Contrary, the reverse happens. It will sharply lower its attacking stats and speed while increasing both defense stats. A ridiculously powerful tool for Shuckle to have, as it already has incredible defenses and can bolster them even further, walling out even the most powerful Pokemon. Now, Shuckle isn't exactly the greatest wall in Pokemon of all time, as it lacks tools to give it longevity like recovery moves or an ability like Regenerator, but despite its mediocre competitive record, it's still the face of the very concept of defense in Pokemon, and it's been that way for 27 years. Speed is a pretty interesting mechanic in Pokemon as well. Typically speaking, Pokemon tend to fall into 4 camps. They're either fast and offensive, fast and defensive, slow and offensive, or slow and defensive. The fast offensive Pokemon tend to be glass cannons that set the pace of the game. Take Meowscarada, for example, who often leads a match to try to take a quick KO or pivot out into another Pokemon. A fast defensive Pokemon fills a very rare role. These are Pokemon that are able to play a support role in a match, utilizing their natural speed to do all the things that a defensive Pokemon may want to, but before any other Pokemon can move, making them especially valuable. This is especially exemplified by Screamtail, who is best known for using moves like Encore and Disable to be a nuisance in battle while being pretty hard to knock out. A slow offensive Pokemon tends to be bulkier and have great damage output, but is designed in such a way that its low speed is mostly to its detriment, forcing the user to have to intelligently position it to get the full value out of it, like in the case of Ursaluna. And the slow defensive Pokemon is effectively just a wall meant to stand in the way of opposing Pokemon and slowing the pace of battle, kind of like Shuckle. In a way, the speed stat informs the way that a Pokemon plays a match at a much deeper level than the other stats, with it affecting every interaction that Pokemon has. So which route would the fastest Pokemon ever take? Enter Regieleki, an electric Pokemon with a massive 200 base speed stat, once again, even higher than Deoxys speed. The Deoxys forms are a line of Pokemon that become even more unemployed by the day. Regieleki would ultimately be a glass cannon, with it having extremely low defenses and mediocre offensive stats that are bolstered by its ability Transistor to grant it major damage output. At 200 base speed, Regieleki manages to actually strike a very strange balance. Like I said, speed informs a Pokemon's playstyle more than any of the other stats. And when that speed gets this high, the less it needs to be invested in to get the value out of it that you need. The next fastest Pokemon that is seen in official competitive play is Calyrex Shadow Rider at 150 speed. This is a gap so large that in order to outspeed the fastest possible Calyrex, Regieleki only needs to invest 3 points to hit the speed stat of 223 at level 50 and remain the fastest Pokemon in the game. Now, I could take time to explain Regioleki's overall purpose in the main game, but to be honest, it's just the latest in a long line of legendary Pokemon with 200 in one of their stats. The Regis aren't super deep when you get down to it. At least not nowadays. Back in Gen 3, there was a lot of depth there. Regieleki didn't serve much of a reason beyond being a fun side quest and reward. Its speed informing its competitive relevance is far more interesting in my opinion. Like I said, Regieleki hardly has to be trained in speed to be faster than the next fastest Pokemon. This is a trait so incredible that in a format where Regieleki was at its most powerful, VGC 2020 Series 7, Regieleki was effectively speed creeping itself. Regieleki was often used as a fast electric Pokemon with Electroweb to lower the speed of opposing Pokemon, allowing for partner Pokemon to outspeed them and follow up with a powerful Dynamax attack. While Regieleki began investing heavily into bulk as to not waste its stats in speed, which wouldn't matter in 99% of matchups, and allow Regieleki greater longevity in the battlefield, over time, Regieleki started to invest more and more in speed for some reason. This was to compete with other Regieleki. Yeah, it was sort of an arms race, with players slowly dropping more bulk to invest in even greater speed, which was originally seen as kind of a useless investment in Regieleki, up until the point where they ended up right back where they started. Max speed, max special attack. While Regioleki's speed investment was mostly wasted in matchups where basically every other Pokemon was slower than it, it was extremely relevant anytime it faced another Regieleki, which, given the power and value that it gave to teams, was really often. And because the consequence of having your Regieleki move after the opposing Regieleki was being electrowebbed, outsped, and sometimes just losing the match turn 1, players had to avoid this at all costs. And the only way to guarantee that your Regieleki would be faster than the opponent, or at least have a 50-50 shot of moving first, was to max out the speed stat. That or run the Choice Scarf like a crazy person, which people did that, by the way. The point is that by the end of Series 7, Regieleki was not only the fastest Pokemon in the game, but the arbiter of speed itself. Not only would it move first most of the time, even being able to outrun Trick Room with enough boosts, look into that if you're bored, but it would decide how fast other Pokemon were allowed to be. And I find that to be really interesting from a design perspective. I mean, who else should determine just how fast other Pokemon should be than the fastest Pokemon ever? So, stats. They're pretty cool, right? Yeah, I mean, a few weeks ago, I probably would have just cranked out a quick 12-minute video about each one of these Pokemon and talk about how they were like annoying in online play, but I wanted to take sort of a deep dive into the design of these Pokemon on a deeper level and touch on how their stats affect their identities in battle. I hope you guys liked it. I worked really hard on this, and I don't think anyone else on YouTube is really making videos like this that kind of intersect competitive and casual play. But if you know someone who does, let me know in the comment section below. If you got anything else you want me to talk about in the future, go ahead and let me know in the comment section down below as well. And if you want to support my work or see your name at the end of all my videos like all these other people, be sure to become a YouTube channel member or check out my Patreon page. If you missed the videos where I talk about the Pokemon Champions metagame every single day, check out my second channel. Those videos aren't gone. I'm still posting every single day just on that channel now. This channel will mostly be videos like this from now on, where once a week I'll just kind of do a deep dive into competitive and casual play and kind of intersect them. I hope you enjoy it. If you guys do, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.